This is Sid Roth saying, I have a vision. Now is the set time to blow the trumpet in Zion.
Blow a trumpet in Zion, sounded on the mountains. Blow a trumpet in Zion, for the day of the Lord is come.
Shalom, Mishpacha. Shalom, family. Mishpacha is a Hebrew word. It means family. And we're the Mishpacha, the family with a Jewish heart, made up of Jewish and non-Jewish people that are one new man in the Messiah. Getting ready, Mishpacha, to blow the grandest shofar, or the grandest trumpet in Zion. We want everyone everywhere to hear the good news. We want everyone everywhere to be red hot for the Messiah. On yesterday's broadcast, I was telling you about my background. I was raised in a traditional Jewish home. Kind of turned off on hypocrisy I saw in religion, and we Jews don't have a corner in the market. There's hypocrisy in most religious people, and turned off on the liturgy and the tradition, but not turned off on being a Jew. Proud of being a Jew. And my big goal in life was to become a millionaire. I reached age 29. I wasn't a millionaire, and I panicked. I had an early midlife crisis. I left my wife. I left my job at Merrill Lynch. I was searching for happiness. I wrote a song when I was younger called "There Must Be Something More." My heart was screaming, there must be something more, but my solution was to make $1 million. I thought that would bring me that something more, that happiness, but I had to reach my goal was to make $1 million before age 30, and here I'm 29, so I panicked, and at the end of the year, my life was worse than at the beginning. And at that point, I got involved in a New Age meditation course. I found that the power started increasing. I had invited a counselor inside of me that was supposed to be a friend, and I was in an office. They offered it to me free. These were born-again Christians that God told them to offer me this office. And one day he said to me, one of the owners, "You're involved in spiritual adultery because it's an abomination to be involved in things like channeling and communicating with the dead and psychic networks." That didn't exist at that time, but he would have said that if it did. Going to fortune tellers. God calls these abominations. And, on the 1% chance that this was truth, and that's about all I gave it, 1%, I decided I would go into neutral gear. I wouldn't use this power. And I got the shock of my life. This voice that I had opened myself to by taking this meditation course. These meditation courses, by the way, are nothing more than companies dedicated to get someone demonized, filled with demons. They're really good people trying to accomplish good things. They don't even know it themselves. They're the most deceived. But I didn't understand any of that. And then I got the shock of my life. This counselor that I invited inside of me that was a perfect gentleman, that was supposed to be my servant, that would do nothing bad, all of a sudden this voice started cursing me, and I could hear these curse words within. And between what my friends said, the Bible said, which in Deuteronomy 18, it was an abomination to be involved in these things, and all of a sudden I'm starting to read Bible just a little bit on the 1% chance this might be true. And all of a sudden, this thing inside of me starts cursing me. So the only thing I could think to do was, I'm going to go for a ride in my car. And I went for a ride, and I ended up at a very large bookstore. And, of course, I went to the biggest section in the bookstore. It was called Occult back then. It's called New Age today. And I've started looking at the various titles. I'm looking for a diversion. I want to get my mind off of this stuff. I'm a positive thinker. I want to be a positive person, not a negative person. And so I looked through the various titles, and one title caught my eye. First of all, it was my favorite color. It was blue. And I look at the title. It's called The Jew. I'm Jewish. The Bible. I'm starting to read the Bible. And the Supernatural. I love the Supernatural. By McCandless Phillips, a reporter from the New York Times. Real credible person. I opened the book. And I'll tell you, I couldn't put it down. I paid for it. I went back to my apartment, and I started reading the book. And this book had a new switch, a new wrinkle on it that my Christian friends hadn't told me. It had this same Deuteronomy 18 saying it was an abomination to be involved in things like astrology and hypnosis and going to psychics and fortune tellers and having your palm read, communicating with the dead and seances, in channeling, and all of these things. The Bible said it was abomination, but I wasn't sure the Bible was from God, but I was sure this thing inside of me didn't like me reading the Bible. But this was the new wrinkle that was in this book. It said it's an abomination for anyone to be involved in these things, but it was worse for a Jew. And the reason that it was worse for a Jew is we Jewish people, whether we know it or not, have a covenant from God, and God honors that covenant. And God expects us to honor that covenant, and that's why of all people, when we follow the covenant, we're blessed above all people, but when we violate the covenant, we're cursed. And it began to list famous Jewish people that I had heard of that were involved in the New Age and lost their life, and lost their mind, and lost everything that they valued. And there was one that really shouted at me. I mean, it literally crushed me. You see, my hero at that time was a Jewish man by the name of Brian Epstein. If you remember, Brian was the manager of a rock group called the Beatles. And that was before any of them had died. And at that point, they had all gone to the Himalayas. They had been involved in meditation, same type of thing that I was involved in. But at that time, only one of them had died. Guess which one? The one that was my idol, my hero, had all that money, all that fame, all that notoriety, everything that I thought would make someone happy. And he was dead at a young age. And that really hit me. And I thought, maybe what my Christian friends are telling me is true. I'm going to just put this aside and not think about it anymore. And as a matter of fact, that's what I did. I blocked it, and I went to another New Age type of class, and we were like holding hands and meditating, and all of a sudden I had a vision. And in this vision, I saw myself, and I saw something come out of myself. And the thing that came out of me looked just like me. And I remember nudging the woman whose hand I was holding, and I said to her, "Let me tell you what I just saw." And she said, "Oh, that's so wonderful. You have just been shown that you are breaking into astral projection, where your spirit leaves your body." And for some of you that think this is just some sugarness, some craziness, untrue. In Russia, they've been experimenting with this for years. In major universities in America, they've been experimenting with these things for years. It is real. And then I went to another New Age class, and just coincidentally, except you and I know better, and they're talking about astral projection. And they told me something my friend hadn't told me. They said, once you break in this astral projection, every time you go to sleep, your spirit leaves your body. Now, have you ever seen, remember the Rod Serling science fiction shows? Well, I could have written a plot for Mr. Serling that his wildest imagination could have never come up with. I had pictures of myself going to sleep at night and my spirit leaving my body and being buried alive. And I started having the worst fear I think it's possible to have. Now remember, I did read all these books on positive thinking. And you know, positive thinking is wonderful until you bump into your first crisis. And I bumped into a crisis that was bigger than me. So what did I always do in the past when I bumped into a crisis that was bigger than me? I'd call my mother, and she'd bail me out. But you know, I couldn't call my mother. She'd think I was crazy. She'd send me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist, I'd say, "Psychiatrist, I'm hearing voices." What should I do? I mean, a few years ago, they used to give people lobotomies and make them imbeciles, and that was the best thing they had. They had. There's no way he could relate to that. How about my rabbi? If I went to him, I think the best he could have done is sent me back to a psychiatrist. I couldn't go to my parents. I couldn't go to my rabbi. I couldn't go to a psychiatrist. I mean, I knew it was real. I knew what was going on. I knew there was something inside of me that I didn't want. I knew that what God said was true. I wasn't looking for God. I still, even at that point, I mean, talk about how hard someone could be. I wasn't looking for God at that point, especially Jesus. All I wanted was to get out of the trap that I was in. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where, there was nowhere that I could go. And so my Christian friends at that point gave me a little tract. It's called 4 Spiritual Laws. Have you ever heard of that? Of course you have. And I read it, and I said it, and nothing happened. You see, being involved in the New Age, there were feelings, there were visions, there were all sorts of supernatural phenomena. And so when nothing happened, I didn't tell them I had read that tract, by the way, and said it. I wouldn't have given them the satisfaction of that. But, I was desperate. And nothing happened. But I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that God heard that. I really do. Even though I didn't have those great reactions that I had in the New Age. But I figured it didn't work. God didn't hear me. At least he would have come and spoken to me by name a couple of times. Nothing. And I remember going home that night. Phone would ring. I mean, I had such fear. I would shake all over when the phone would ring. I was afraid to go to sleep at night for fear my spirit would leave my body and I'd be buried alive. I mean, life was too hard. Do you remember that young boy that I told you about earlier this week that started thinking to himself, what happens when you die? And it was so objectionable, I didn't want to think about it anymore. All those years I blocked it from my mind. Well, I reached a point where death looked better than life. Ceasing to exist is what I still thought was true. Ceasing to exist was much better than the life that I was living. It couldn't get any worse. So on the worst night of my life, I called my wife on the phone. Now you have to understand, my wife was raised a Southern Baptist. When she got to college, she had atheistic professors and became an agnostic. And then when we got married, I insisted she convert to Orthodox Judaism. So you might say she was a Southern Baptist, agnostic, Orthodox Jew. But I figured everyone that wasn't Jewish knew Jesus. And I was desperate. I needed help. I called her on the telephone. Well, we're out of time. But if you want this complete story, and you have a friend involved, trapped and snared in the New Age, I urge you to get my testimony book. The title is the same title of the song that I wrote, There Must Be Something More, The Spiritual Rebirth of a Jew. We're asking $10 postage paid. Call or write today for the book, There Must Be Something More.
If you would like to receive a complimentary copy of our bi-monthly teaching newsletter, cassette catalog, or information about becoming Mishpocha, write to me, Sid Roth, Post Office Box 1918, Brunswick, Georgia 31521. Or call our order-only line, 1-800-548-1918. To place a credit card order, call anytime, 1-800-548-1918. For all other calls, the number is 912-265-2500. That's 912-265-2500. For a cassette tape of this week's broadcast, send $5 to Sid Roth, Post Office Box 1918, Brunswick, Georgia 31521. Look us up on the web, www.sidroth.org. That's www